Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio. So, Samantha.
Yes.
Here's my question. We've discussed before, we are runners.
Yeah. I say that with quotes around it, quotation marks around that, for me specifically.
Yes, which actually we're going to talk about a little bit in this episode. But, okay, so it sounds to me like, you've got a bit of a, it's not necessarily your favorite thing. And I'm just curious how and why you got into it.
Right. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. But essentially, I needed a stress reliever when I was working with the Department of Family and Children's Services, because all I actually did was sit and eat fast food because this job was so stressful and also time-consuming. And also because I pretty much got paid less than minimum wage, I couldn't afford gyms. They're freaking expensive.
Yes.
And at that point, I was more in the suburban areas of Georgia, so of course limited in that as well. So my only other option was running. And so walking around the neighborhood. And walking, I like it, but I would like going fast pace. And then I love good music. So having that paired motivated me to start running. And then I needed goals. So the way I actually truly ran, my first race was the Peachtree Road Race, and I did that race. And then after I did that race, I kind of got addicted to the racing component.
Yeah. Well, the virtual race for that is this weekend.
Yeah.
What's some of your go-to songs on your playlist? What are you listening to?
Oh my goodness. I have a lot of hip hop on there, obviously. That is my go-to, and it keeps me going. I'm trying to think. I would have to go back through the list. I think the first song, but you know what? I have some Taylor Swift on there. Yeah. It got me motivated. I have, let's see, is it the Donnas? I'm pulling up my list right now, just so y'all know.
Okay, we're getting the official.
giving you a serious rundown. It's been a very long time, though, since I've even pulled up that list. So, thanks for the reminder, Anney.
I live to remind you of things you don't want to be reminded.
Yeah, I'm like, remember that song? Yeah, but it's very outdated now. What about you?
So I've told the story before of how I got into running, but briefly, because I don't know if I've told you, Samantha. I was a really active child, and I ran a lot for sports, but I wasn't like running necessarily until college. And it embarrasses me to say, but it's true. There was a guy I wanted to impress. And on my campus, we played a game called Humans versus Zombies, which from what I understand, they still play, although I'm sure during this pandemic they don't, and it might feel weird afterwards. But it was like this running game where you, as a human, you wore these bandanas to demarcate which one you were, human or zombie, and zombies could turn you into human. It was like tag.
Okay.
But I got really fast because of it. Like I did uphill sprints to get faster. I wanted to be really good at this very dorky game, and I got really good at it.
I bet.
And then after that, it just became something that I did because we played it. I played it every year, and I just never stopped until our recent quarantine times. And today's book we're going to be talking about has made me miss it so much.
Yeah.
But I have two playlists for running. I have one for shorter, faster races, and I have one for longer races. The one for longer races has over 1,000 songs on it, and some of them are really slow songs that I think people would be really annoyed at. But I like them. I like you get in that state of mind where you're just thinking about things, and then some dramatic soundtrack song comes on. I love it.
Yeah.
But I got really into like the beats per minute and what songs are at this beat per minute. They'll make me run at this pace. Oh, it's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really good. I know for a while I tried to listen to podcasts, but I would actually have conversations with myself or laugh out loud while running, and I thought that was a little too much while running on things like the Beltline. Yeah. And then I also tried the zombie running app. Have you tried that one?
Yes, I love that. I got like all the way to the end.
I would die every time. Within the first 5 minutes, I died. I'm like, well, son of a bitch. So I quit that one real quick.
I never died, but it gets really sad. Like some of the characters you get attached to die, and you're like, oh
no. Yeah, you have to pick this up. You have to go over here. You have to do this. And then it tells you, oh, zombies right there. Oh, you died.
It's called Zombies Run for anyone who's interested. It's very fun. I like it. And yeah, I know a lot of you listeners listen to this very podcast or other podcasts when you run, and I love that.
So if you're running right now, get it. Proud of you.
Get it. We're proud of you. We're rooting for you. Speaking of listeners, this book that we're talking about today was a listener suggestion from Carrie. So thank you, Carrie.
Good suggestion.
And yes, because today we're talking about the 2017 book, A Beautiful Work in Progress by Mirna Valerio, who I actually met at a We Hike to Heal event, which Samantha and I discussed way back when in our trauma series. And we got to interview the people who created that organization, which was really great.
I was very jealous. I wanted to meet her, but I ended up having to work, I think, and I couldn't come.
Yeah, it was a beautiful event. So Mirna also runs the, and yes, that was a pun. Thank you. You're welcome. The blog Fat Girl Running. And in both these mediums, she delves into her experience entering the world of running, and particularly trail running, as a Black, fat woman in traditionally white, skinny spaces. She's in her 40s, and she keeps a slow pace, other things that don't fit the stereotypical mold of what we think of when we think of a runner, necessarily. But she is absolutely an athlete doing the work. And existing in these places publicly is important to her, so she can break down the idea of what athletes, quote, should look like and motivate others who aren't used to seeing someone who looks like them in these spaces. In 2018, Mirna was named National Geographic's Adventurer of the Year, so congrats on that. And she's been featured in and written for all kinds of publications, from Women's Running Magazine to BuzzFeed. She also gives speeches and holds retreats.
Which I would love to be a part of those too. So the plot largely revolves around her path to becoming a runner, an ultra marathoner, which I'm like, wow, I cannot believe that. The idea of going beyond half a marathon to me, or half marathons, was too much. The stories I've heard from that was too much for me. So that's amazing. And all the influences that motivated that decision and keep her going. She's obviously super impressive. And she's called the Motivator for a reason, which is perfect for her, I think. Her persistence to put one foot in front of the other, to keep going, is beyond inspiring. And she's really honest in what this level of running requires, the way your body may react. She describes races she's run, key events from her life that helped her make her who she was, and successes and failures, although she frames them in a more constructive light.
Yeah, which I gotta say, I loved her take of, maybe I didn't finish this race, but I completed 28 kilometers of whatever it was.
Right.
And that's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, it was actually really beautiful to listen to her about when she didn't finish a race and talking about whether or not to go on to the next one and feeling embarrassed or feeling like she didn't accomplish it, but then thinking things through and be like, no, I did this much. And not only did I do this much, but I have to prepare for the next one and the next one. Like, she never stopped, which I would have been like, nah, I'm good now.
Well, and I think it takes a really great strength to recognize, and this was something I never fully mastered, to recognize, I could keep going maybe, but I will really damage my body and I won't be able to do the next race.
Right.
To be able to respect your body in that way and listen to your body in that way, I think is fantastic and amazing and a skill in itself. And that is nothing to see. That's amazing, like that you did that much. And it was really cool to read for me because I've had a lot of similar experiences running that she has, which we're going to go into in a little bit. Minus the fact I've only run a marathon. I've never done more than that. And I put only in front of marathon. Marathon is still pretty good.
Yeah. That's 26.2 miles. So yeah, you're fine.
Yes. And to be honest, to be completely honest, I've never wanted to do more than that. But I super respect people that do. And a lot of the stuff she writes about is in Georgia. So I think both you and I, Samantha, recognize some of those places. And that was really cool. And she currently lives in northern Georgia, I believe.
Does she?
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun.
Where in North Georgia? Because, the book begins in East Ellijay, which is actually my hometown. This is where I grew up. I was like, wait, I don't know if I've ever seen Ellijay mentioned in any national book ever.
Yeah, that was great.
I had a moment of pausing, like, what? What?
And Rabun? Is that Imogen?
No, that's Gilmer. Rabun County's farther up.
I think that's where she lives, is Rabun.
Okay. She is in the mountains.
She is in the mountains. I can say that for sure. It feels so creepy to be like, this is where she lives. So we never met her. But she says it in the book.
Okay. She moves around a lot. And she also travels a lot for racing, which again,
Yes.
I actually wanted to do that at one point in time. I wanted to go to each state and do a half marathon.
Oh, wow.
I made it to 3.
Oh, that's pretty good. I think I've only done 2. So you got me beat. Georgia, Florida. Throughout the book, there are themes of family, of friendship, the power of kindness, the power of determination, the power of self-love. And related to this episode, if you want, we've done past episodes on the feminism of running, of hiking, and something called gym intimidation, which is basically being intimidated to go to the gym because of a lot of pressures put on women and how they should look. So those episodes exist. But I kind of wanted to take this moment, Samantha, and just talk about running for a minute, because it is something that I do love and I absolutely miss, but I also kind of don't. There was a part of me that was like, wow, you can't run now. Mm-hmm. And I really did need the break. I've talked about before I turned running into kind of a really bad coping mechanism. So I just wanted to talk about why we like running or why perhaps we don't like running. So one thing that comes up a lot in this book is Mirna having these moments of just absolutely hating what she's doing and questioning why she's doing it. But then kind of coming back to herself like, no, I chose to do this. I signed up to do this. I trained for this. And I can relate to that so hard.
Right.
Of having those moments of like just absolutely hating running, especially when you're like far away from your home and you know the only way to get back is to either continue running, keep a walk, which will take forever, or heaven forbid, call a Lyft or something and have to explain your situation, which I have had friends do. And just thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? And I don't know. I just really love it. I love how it makes me feel strong. I love like this feeling, which I haven't had in a long time, by the way, because quarantine, but of like when you take the steps 2 at a time and your thigh muscles just feel so strong. I love that. Yeah. And I love how you feel afterwards. Like, well, for me, I feel like I can solve any problem and I feel totally rejuvenated. Sometimes I would send emails after work after I'd run and people would be like, are you drunk? And I'm like, no, I just run, man. Right. And then I would do things like I wake up at 4 a.m. on weekends and I would drink terrible coffee because I just needed the caffeine. Mm-hmm. And I'd run anywhere from 10 to 20 miles. And I did that for years. But all that being said, it took a long time for me. Like if you had asked me even like 3 years ago, I wouldn't have said I'm a runner necessarily. Right. And it took a long time for me to claim that or to think of myself as an athlete. And like I said, I played a lot of sports as a child, but when puberty hit, and boys got all weird about naming girls' boobs after states, I was too self-conscious about my body.
Wait. What?
This didn't happen at your school? This isn't like a universal?
No.
So you would get a nickname based on, well, like while you were running, based on the like mountainous of the state of how big your boobs were.
Maybe it's because I didn't run in high school, but what?
Oh, that happened, in middle school, man.
Okay.
It's younger than that. It was awful. It was embarrassing.
There's definitely a big gap between your age and my age, but okay, I'm going to have to chew on that for a little bit. Keep going.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and I thought I was too chubby for sports, so that I was too weak for them. I wasn't good enough. And it wasn't until a few years ago, I was buying a new pair of running shoes, and the salesperson was asking me how many miles I ran a week. And she was like, so you're pretty much running a half marathon every weekend, after I told her. And I just blinked at her for a moment, kind of shocked, because I'd never thought of it that way, because I wasn't doing races. I was just running. Mm-hmm. I was just running. And I wasn't a runner, right? But she was correct. I was I was doing that. And before you yell at me, I know that's not healthy. I was really bad at tapering. I was really bad at taking breaks. As I said, it was a skill I did not pick up, and I paid the price for it.
Yeah.
And this is something the book absolutely touches on this disconnect between how an athlete should look and even perform, and the reality of the wide variance of what we do look like and what constitutes an athlete. There are so many things I've done that I never thought I would be able to do. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would be like, nope, never gonna run a marathon. And that thought, I'd heard it from other people and I'd internalized it, and it held me back. Absolutely held me back.
Yeah, I do love that she not only talks about that within running, but she talks about it in her career, her love of music, her love of literature, like this already bias towards her. And obviously, she doesn't know these things. And then she also talks about that when meeting her husband. She kind of flipped that on him. She's like, oh, he's never read this book. And then he did. She's like, oh, well, damn, you know? And I love that she does talk about those perspectives being broken and those stereotypes being broken, and she just did it her way, and she did it what she loved. And again, she talks about the insecurities that she had and people being judgmental, but the support group that she had that pushed her even better. Like, I love all of those. As for running, I was the same way. I am definitely the person who is all or none. So if I'm not the best at it, I'm not going to do it. That was my mentality all growing up. And that's a lot to do with my inability to try because of my self-worth, self-esteem, and automatically assuming I can't do this. So running was one of the things of like, why can't I do this? This is the easier one. Like, instead of rock climbing, or instead of like, for some reason, it was a huge thing while I was in college for people to do trapeze workouts.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I was like, I can't do that. That's not something I was like, nah, I'm good about that. But I didn't start running, like you said, until a lot later, partially because me being chunky and thick, I was too embarrassed to work out because I didn't want people to judge me for being too big to do workouts, which is, this is a narrative that we have seen, whether it's people bullying people in gyms, as we talked about in the previous episodes, or has been talked about in previous episodes. It's that same narrative that you allow to perpetuate in your mind that stops you before beginning. But for me, when I was in DFACs and going through all of the stress and emotions and the triggering and the PTSD, I had to do something, and I could not afford all of these things. And realizing that maybe if I put money down for a race that's 6 months ahead, I could do it. Maybe I can do this. And that was kind of the whole thing. I actually was motivated by race by race by race. So I did a lot of 5Ks, a lot of 10Ks, several half marathons. I couldn't go beyond that, which I've never ran more than, I think, 16 miles. So for you to do what you did every weekend, yeah, girl, I don't know how you're standing. That seems impossible. Because I know a lot of people do run, but they also know to take breaks. They have to, because their body will just collapse a lot of the times. But all that to say, the one time that I ran the 16 miles because I got lost. And I was very miserable. And the last 3 miles was me pretty much walking, trying to figure out where the hell I was. I didn't have my phone on me, I don't think, that day for some weird reason. Or I did, or it died. Yeah, it died. Because I was too far away.
Oh, no.
So all of those things, I didn't have my wallet on me. I didn't have anything on me because I just go. My whole thing is take a key, be as less as possible. So that long run, that was hell. Like, that was probably the most miserable. But I loved that because afterwards, I counted my miles in donuts. That's how I would say it. So I'm like, every mile, one donut. Every mile, one donut. So I would tell people I could have 6 donuts now. After I do a half marathon, I'd be like, I can have 13 donuts now. Like, it's kind of that thing. But I also was like a highs for me too. I remember I finished mine in Baltimore. I was in Baltimore, D.C., but my friends picked me up after I finished the race, and I was blabbering like I was high the entire time. I could not stop. And I think it was also because I had my best time there. So I was like, yeah, I did it. That was something to accomplish. But yeah, it's also hate it because being motivated, trying to get myself motivated is part of the hardest parts. And then in Georgia, it's kind of rough, the landscape. I did one 5K. It was only a 5K. but it was so hilly that it was one of the hardest races I'd ever done. And my friend who was with me, and I had gotten her to start running with me, this was her first race. She was cursing me the entire way there. And afterwards would not talk to me for 30 minutes because I had no idea. And after that, every time I'd suggest a race, and she did it too. And she wanted to come back after she actually started running. She was like, I'm not letting you trick me into this. And she would look at every race I would suggest to see the hill points before she would say yes for me.
Yes. That's so funny because in the book, Mirna's friends did that with her too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is a trick.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do.
So angry. I'm so angry with you. I started laughing. I was like, yep, nuts. And I did. I was like, that's my bad.
Yeah. I mean, I got a lot of friends into running races and experienced the same thing. And also just to say, like, there is an interesting juxtaposition because I too, like, there came a point, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, where I did start experiencing health problems because I was running too much. And I really wanted to stay fit, but I was trying to find alternatives to running. And there are absolutely alternatives out there that are free, but I too did not have the kind of money and time for a gym because there wasn't anything like super close that I was interested in. And running is free, but then once you start like doing these kinds of things, you got to pay for the race, you got to pay for the shoes.
Right.
So there is, and we talked about that in our episode on running, there is certainly a level of privilege there.
Absolutely.
But it is, if before that point, in theory, free.
Right.
Hopefully you have something near, if it's something you want to do. Also, you need to live in an area where you can run, which not everyone has access to. But all that to say, I have more thoughts on running. But first, we're going to pause for a quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor. So I did want to run through a real quick list of things that I connected to in this book that I thought was great because, like we said, she's so open in this book about like the things that happen to your body when you run.
Right.
Especially for long distances. One is chafing. Oh my gosh. When she wrote about that, I was like, thank you. Thank you. Because I remember explaining to my friends once, they kept telling me, oh, this is such an embarrassing story. But they were like, please take a shower. And I was like, I got to build up to it. And they were like, why? And I was like, the chafing.
It's going to be painful. Yeah. I remember when I tried to figure out what was happening in certain spots of my body, I was like, why is that raw? What's happening? And then finding that there are actual products. Like when you go to the expos before races, they're like, oh, that's what that's for. Like, it's a whole new discovery. And she kind of talks about that, finding the equipment that she needs to be successful. But yeah, it's definitely after you go through all of these things, you're like, oh, I may need that.
Yeah. And this has never happened to me before or since. But once I ran a half marathon in a white t-shirt, and listeners, I got the bloody nipples.
Did you really?
Yeah, and I can't explain why or how. It's not like I'd never not run that distance in that sports bra, but for whatever reason.
You never know, the heat, the humidity. It does remind me of the Office episode where he's only running like half K, essentially.
He eats the fettuccine before.
No. It's Andy, who's like putting the thing everywhere on him because like I chafe and and then he still ended up being bloody.
He's like holding the shirt way out. Yeah, it was embarrassing. My co-host over at Savor, Lauren, was there, and another friend of ours. And they were like, "Do you have another shirt?" Anyway, another thing she talks about in the book is plantar fasciitis, which I also have, which is incredibly painful and hard to get rid of. But basically, it's like the arch of your foot.
It's painful,
Just hurts. It just hurts. Also, she writes about a time she fractured her ankle running, and this also happened to me during a trail race.
Yeah,
and I finished the race. It was like 5 miles. And then I went to work for 2 days after that. And then I couldn't fit my foot in my shoe anymore. And my mom made me go to the hospital. And then I got fired from my job.
Well, damn. It was a rough week. Yeah. Every time I think about trail running, I whenever I would do hiking, like intensive hiking, at least once every few trips, I would sprain my ankle, like to the point that I've
Yeah.
always carried a bandage, ace bandage with me because I've done it so much. My partners, the people who would go with me would be like, my God, how clumsy are you? So as much as I love trail running because it's better for your knees and all of that, because it's not concrete, that danger for me, I was like, nope, I don't want to roll down a hill and die.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been something that's stayed with me now. And I'll just get, I don't know if anyone else does this, but I'll have like, they're not premonitions, but when I'm going down the stairs or something, I'll just have a flash of me falling down the stairs.
Oh, I do that all the time. You know what I'm thinking with her falling and everything and all that. I tried to and did sign up for the uphill race. That's supposed to be the highest elevation in Georgia. And there were stories upon people about having to chain themselves with each other to pull each other up to the top of the mountain because it's so strenuous of a run. Because it's also dead winter. And at the top, you get hot chocolate and chili, apparently.
Oh, interesting.
And a very nice, thick, long sleeve shirt. And I signed up for it, and I didn't do it because I'm like, I can't. I'll die.
Sometimes you got to respect your boundaries.
Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, man, I would definitely roll down that hill.
Yeah. I mean, and in the book, she talks about some of the things that she had to do on these races that I'm like, wow.
That's dedication too. I just also love that she talks about being dead last, and she talks about the DNF, or do not finish, and then dead fucking last, or dead final last, or something like that. She curses in this one. But I love that she was like, you know what, that's fine, but I finished it. And I love that she takes that as a prideful moment because, you know, for everyone else, for so many people who's like, oh, I'd rather not do this if I can't be, you know, part of that. But that does take more persistence to keep going. And it doesn't matter you're the last. You did it.
Well, yeah, I love that too. It was a really refreshing point of view. And one of the reasons she loves this is because it's outdoors and it gives her this time to think and
meet bears.
Meet bears, that she does. Yes. Oh, I've seen some bears on my runs for sure. Yep. She also talks about runner's knee and hip problems, which I too have.
I have so many hip problems.
My runner's knee, I've been in physical therapy for years. She talks about the runner's runs, which is one of my greatest fears. Yeah. Which is diarrhea, by the way, if you don't know. And like the importance of planning out what you're going to eat and when you're going to eat it. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then, Georgia. It was really cool hearing about that since this is our neck of the woods. And it is, being outside is a big part of it for her, and it is for me too. I used to give myself these like really tough problems to try to solve. I almost never solved them on long runs, and I would just get lost in thought and that feeling of moving through nature. I do miss it. She also craves the challenge of the outdoors. She likes the weather and the creatures, the bears, and she's running about all kinds of climates, environments, deserts, mountains. She's run into problems like storms, mud, cacti, non-functioning headlamps in the dark, all kinds of things. But she does keep persisting.
Right. I love her tales when she does it, like these different things, whether it's people intervened and helped her, or she just really hoped for the best.
You gotta hope for the best.
But yeah, I think for me, like when we were talking about doing the races, and for her to come to the mountains of Georgia. When I went to high school in Ellijay, Georgia, there was not a single Black family in that area. And for her to come and race in a strange place with, I think she was with a friend, right? And it seemed like she had met up with a lot of people that she met up online or talked to the community. Doing this is such a challenge, like trying to do this on my own in areas I know I couldn't imagine, but her going as a Black woman into an area that is very, very backwoods for all intent and purposes, that's in itself like, wow. That alone would have made me say no.
Yeah. Yeah. And I respect her so much for, she does make these friends, and she, like, over Facebook groups, that they meet up at these events, and
that's talent.
It is. It really absolutely is. So something else, so thank you very much, listeners, especially listeners who don't run, hate running, whatever, for letting us geek out about running for a second, because it is a huge part of this book.
Right.
But we also wanted to talk about another theme, or themes that are kind of related, which are body positivity, fat positivity, and self-love, which is huge in this work.
And she's really open with her experience of being judged. Like, it's throughout the book, whether it's her buying the shoes or whether it's entering the race or training for races, as though she can't possibly be athletic because of her size, going so far as strangers calling her out online for being a liar. And I love the line she talks about. She's willing to go through with these trolls. She talks about that and doesn't care because she loves it for herself. But people making assumptions about her diet, about her health, which she points out is bizarre, and absolutely is bizarre. She also highlights several resources that we've mentioned before, like Healthy at Any Size. And yeah, I think she's just amazing. She's in shape as hell, like, and getting it done, like getting more done than I have ever in my life.
Yeah. And I mean, we have talked about before how bizarre it is that people feel comfortable enough to call out your health based on your size. And I know she talked about, and she loves food, and she's very open about, I love eating healthy food, but I also love eating fast food. And, I feel like it's pretty balanced. But I think she did an article on some home cooked meals she'd done for one of these websites, and people were just like yelling at her for it.
Wow.
It's like, why?
Why? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, why do people think they can interject their anger for something someone else is doing for herself? Like, and she talked about loving pizza. Hell yeah, I would eat pizza. That used to be my pre-race food. No, post-race food. Maybe my post-race food. I loved it and craved it every time.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Yeah, me too. And it was really, really refreshing to hear from someone writing about loving themselves despite the rigid Western beauty standards. While losing weight was a part of her initial push to start running, it was all around health. That's why she originally started doing it. And that was pretty refreshing too. When you read about what she's accomplished and how powerful her body is and how thankful she is for her body, it's just a breath of fresh air. I at least am so used to people writing about, like, I could do better, grappling with self-loathing or self-hatred. And to hear someone just be like, no, my body is it's getting me through these things. It's there for my son. It's there for me. Like, it's just, I love it. There's also power in making that choice of choosing to make your health a priority when I feel like we are constantly barraged with this message of you are not perfect and you're not worth it, so don't even try it.
Right.
And she dismisses the notion that to be a runner or to be an athlete at all, you have to look a certain way. She knows she doesn't fit the stereotypical profile of a runner, a cross-country runner, an ultra runner. She knows that a lot of times when people see her, they see a, quote, fat girl running, which is where the name of her blog comes from.
Right. And as we talk about her saying fat girl, this is all per her.
Yes, this is the label she has used.
Obviously. And so we did want to read a couple of excerpts out of the book. She writes, quote, this body is fierce, beautiful, and unapologetic. It's meant to move through the world as it wishes, lifting, walking, and running, rolls and all, love handles, bouncy boobs, curves, tummy, butt, back fat, and all.
Yes. And then she's also been obviously interviewed in a lot of publications, like we said. So in one interview, she wrote, my body shape and size is not an asset for fast running, but the fat that I have on my body is definitely helpful in terms of endurance. I can run, bike, and walk forever. I've faced some criticism, but it's usually from people who are negative about everything. The sport is largely very inclusive. If you look at any race, you'll see a range of bodies, tall, short, big, small, fat, whatever. Those bodies are out there doing their thing, and even if you don't have what's considered a typical, quote, runner's body, you can do it too. And then when I did the We Hike to Heal event, the leaders of the event had us journal a body promise where we wrote down ways we weren't kind to our body, ways we were thankful to our body, and how we could be better to our body. And it was a really powerful exercise. I still think about it to this day. And it did give me a new respect for how kind of dismissive I was being of the things I could do.
Right.
It was nice.
I think, between the women from We Hike to Hill and Mirna, the conversation is that we should be grateful to our bodies. I remember specifically during our interview with them how they talked about the fact that we need to take time and say thank you for getting us out of the bed. for walking us to our car. Like all of these things, just to have a process of acknowledging that as much as we wish to change everything, how much our body does for us. And that was that whole conversation Mirna has within this book as well. It is such a beautiful concept and trying to remind myself, and I know, Anney, you too, throughout all these awful times, the small things such as just walking, just moving, just breathing, we should be grateful into our bodies for doing these functions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's something else we should be grateful for, and that's strong women.
Right.
We're going to get into that, but first we're going to pause for one more quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor.
Right, and she writes a lot about the toll of being the bedrock of a family, of taking care of others. Something she saw and marveled at in her mom, but also saw the physical impact it had on her. By the way, I feel like we're going to address this soon enough, but I've seen that so often placed on women, of just the impact of caring for other people's families or within your own family and beyond yourself. And for her, eventually, herself, when she had a health scare that turned her life around, and she talked about the panic attacks, which she thought was a heart attack, stuff like that is such a scary perspective to have and to try to figure out what is going on within yourself.
Yeah, and all of that stuff is compounded by, because she goes through her family, and so a lot of her family did have these like stress-related illnesses that led to their death at a pretty young age, and that is compounded by issues of race and of gender and of class, because there the food you can afford based on where you are and the jobs you have, and all of this can compound and just build up, and it is stressful, and we do see that physical toll on your body. And something else we've talked about before is this whole idea of selfless. And that being a moral quality, especially as it applies to mothers, and how damaging that can be of never taking the time for yourself. And that's a good thing.
Right.
And then your body will suffer for that.
Right.
And your mental health as well. And so throughout this book, we see the power of strong, supportive women and the importance of that support. So many friends and family members had the author's back, offering words of support, the motivation she needed, the push she needed. And strangers too, I loved that. I loved how many times she had an instance with a stranger who's like, "Hey, are you all right? What do you need? I'll go get it for you." Right. It was just really refreshing. And she not only motivates herself, she motivates others in her life too. From the students she teaches, to the people who follow her blog, people who follow her on social media, to people who see her training or at races. She forms a bond with people, usually women, at the back of the pack, and they call themselves the Turtles.
I love that. I love that. But don't get it wrong. She's also competitive, but is often able to see the success in what she herself is accomplishing. I love that. She's not looking at everyone else. She's looking at what her goals are. At the back of the pack, sometimes last. And she inspires, obviously, a lot of people because of that, because she doesn't quit, because she keeps moving forward. Even if she doesn't finish, she'll be at that next race trying harder.
Yeah. And like even the few times she does kind of compete with others, it's still much more about herself and trying to prove this to herself. And that's something I've talked about. What I do is I'll pick someone.
Me too.
And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to get you. I'm going to pass you."
There's always
sometimes
that one
I do,
person.
Sometimes I don't.
There's always that one person I'm like, "I'm going to do better than you. I'm going to beat you because you have a stupid shirt on, because it says something dumb on it, or racist or sexist. I'm going to beat you."
I usually pick based on color, which is
of the shirt.
Well, yeah, if it's bright, because then I know I can see it in the crowd. So it has nothing to do usually with the person. Also, I try to pick someone that's reasonable. I think that I can pass them. Because one time I picked somebody, I was like, there was no way. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I thought that about kids. I'm like, I can beat you. Oh, no, I can't beat her. That little 10-year-old just passed me 4 times now.
It's a good feeling because you're like, good for you, kid. But you're also like, I don't like you, kid.
Quit using your youth against me.
Yeah. There was a teacher at my high school whom I loved, Mr. Cup. And he was like 70, mid-70s. And I ran a race with him once in high school. And Lord help me, he lapped me so many times. And he did it. He looked like he did it in a way that looked like he wasn't even running.
Right.
Like he was in a slow jog.
Those people.
But he was passing me. And he was smiling. He would say something to me. And Mr. Cup. But good for you, Mr. Cup. Anyway, all this to say, you can do hard things, which is a callback to one of our earlier books we did in book club, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Nothing that Mirna did was easy, but she did it, and she continues to do it, and she continues to inspire. And it was a joy to read. It did make me very much miss running in the outdoors and hiking.
I'm not going to lie. I had a dream about it after reading said book.
Did you?
Yeah, about I need to get up. I need to go run. I got to go run.
I think I had too. I think I've been dreaming about it too. So thank you again for the suggestion, Carrie. And we keep those suggestions coming. What should we read next? Ooh. Email us. Let us know. Our email is stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You or on Twitter at MomStuffPodcast. Thanks as always to our super producer, Andrew Howard.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.